Chairman.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this North Western Area Planning Committee meeting today, Wednesday the 23rd of September 2020. My name is Councillor Mrs Maddie Thompson. I'm the chairman of this committee. This meeting is held under the new regulations which came into effect on 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please could I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off, when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting is being hosted remotely, streamed live and recorded, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for questions or any other purpose. Members, when speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn your microphone on and your video if possible. Now, please may I ask the officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Lee, who is top of my list. Mr. Lee.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Lee and I'm Lead Specialist Place at Malden District Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. Michael Johnson, Lead Specialist Development Management. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles.
Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Bowles. I'm a Specialist in Development Management.
Thank you. Ms. Parker-Haynes.
Good afternoon. I'm Hayley Parker-Haynes and I'm a Senior Caseworker in Development Management at Malden District Council.
Thank you. And Ms. or Mrs. Fuller, sorry, I didn't ask first, which you prefer.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Fuller. I'm clerk to this afternoon's committee.
Thank you. Any other officers present? Is Tara still with us? Is she doing technical things?
No, Tara will be in the background.
Okay, thank you. Katie, can you please now carry out a roll call of members to confirm those who are in attendance? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. Members, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate if you are present, starting with Councillor Bamford.
Yes, I'm present, Katie.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Present.
Good afternoon. Councillor Fleming. I know we've received apologies from her. Yes. Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, thank you, Katie. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Good evening, afternoon, present.
Good afternoon. Councillor Morley, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Good afternoon, Katie. Present.
Good afternoon. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
I'm here. Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Councillor Miss White. No. Okay.
Apologies, I think. Could you please note her apologies?
I will.
And can we have other members, not members of the committee, but who are in attendance, please?
Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Councillor Morris.
I think that's it. I don't see anyone else. Thank you very much. So we've actually done the apologies on the way through that. So we have Councillor Mrs. Fleming and Councillor White. Okay. So item 3 on the agenda is minutes of the 26th of August. Can I take those as read, please, members?
Agreed.
Yes, no problem.
Agreed.
Does anyone have any queries
Agreed.
on matters of accuracy?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Does anyone dissent from agreeing these by assent? I know that sounds barking, but it's much easier to say no than to wait for everybody to say yes. Okay. Members, can we agree these minutes as they are?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes, Chairman.
Agreed.
Agree, yes, they are.
Thank you very much. Nobody wishing to speak, as far as I can tell. Right. Item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. If anyone has an interest to declare, could you please use the chat function now, and I will invite you to speak. And no, Councillor Durham has his hand up. I would appreciate being able to just rely on the chat and not so much the hands, but I've spotted you this time, Councillor Durham. Thanks.
Much appreciated, Chairman. Thank you. I have a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, who are consultees on items relating to the planning applications we're about to determine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No one else? No one else. So we move to agenda item 5, which is planning application 20-00641. This is land northwest of Fernbrook Hall, Moat Lane. Ms. Bowles will present the report. We do have a submission from the applicant via Mr. Stemp, the agent, and Mr. Johnson will read that after the presentation. Thank you. So off you go, Ms. Bowles, please. Councillor Durham, would you take your legacy hand down, please, if it is a legacy hand? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the demolition of an existing stable block and the construction of a 5-bedroom detached house. Here we've got the location plan. You can see the application site here outlined in red. And we've got the block plan. This is the existing dwelling on the larger site and the proposed dwelling. Proposed site layout. The existing stable block proposed to be demolished. The front and rear elevations of the proposed dwelling. Side elevations of the proposed dwelling. And the proposed floor plans. This floor plan here is the basement level. This is the second story, and this is the third story. And we've got some site photographs where you can see the existing stable and menage, proposed location of the dwelling. This is the access here, some of the surrounding areas. You can, in this photo here, you can see the stable block through the trees, although it is quite small in the distance. So the application is a resubmission of a previously refused scheme. The reasons for refusal relate to the unsustainable location of the proposal and the impact on the character and appearance of the area. The main amendments to the scheme relate to the design, appearance and scale of the dwelling. The amendments are not considered to have addressed the previous concerns raised. The application site lies outside of the defined settlement boundary of Wycombe Bishops in an unsustainable location. The proposed development is remote from community support facilities and would facilitate unsustainable transport patterns. Furthermore, the development would have an urbanising effect on the rural character of the area and would result in an unwelcome visual intrusion and encroachment into the rural countryside. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, would you read the submission from Mr. Stemp for the applicant, please?
So, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. These are as a series of points by the applicant. It is emphasised that the proposed dwelling does not fall within the ancient woodland. The ancient woodland is fenced off from the existing access drive and no pedestrians will enter the woodland. The previous refusal of planning permission for a dwelling on the site did not refer to any harm being caused to the ancient woodland. There is no reason why this proposal should. Disappointing to see that the report makes no reference to the offer by the applicant to enter into a legal agreement with the council to conserve and manage the woodland. Such an agreement is encouraged by Essex Wildlife Trust to conserve the woodlands. The proposal dwelling is a well-designed, attractive house which fits into the natural landscape of the site. The design has been prepared by an experienced chartered architect. The proposal results in a high-quality dwelling. It does constitute sustainable development, and although some use of a motor car is to be expected, it would not result in harm to the council's objectives of sustainable development. A large dwelling of such exceptional quality would not occur in a defined settlement simply because the land allocation in a defined settlement would be developed as a housing estate. Part of the character of Wickham Bishops is the large dwellings built around the outskirts of the village. These properties are not located within the defined settlement. The proposal would deliver a large new dwelling which reflects the local character and natural asset of the area. Although the council can achieve a 5-year supply of deliverable housing land, this requirement is not a maximum figure. The government is looking to see a robust delivery of housing. The definition of previously developed land, as defined in government advice, refers to the land which is or was occupied by a permanent structure, including the curtilage of the development land and any associated fixed infrastructure. The proposal does constitute previously developed land. The site is a windfall site for which a housing allocation is made for windfall development within the local plan. The proposed dwelling would make a positive contribution to the rural economy of the area and support local shops, facilities and organisations in the village. The existing building on the site is a functional stable building. It is not attractive. The replacement of that stable building with an attractive new dwelling will result in a positive enhancement to the character and appearance of the area. There is a difference in ground levels between the site and Witham Road. 3 dwellings to the north of Witham Road are clearly visible. The existing ancient woodland does provide some natural screening. It is not accepted that this well-designed detached house would result in the urbanisation of the area. The council has slipped in a third reason for refusal. The previous application for planning permission made no reference to the habitat regulations which were existing at the time the planning application was determined. The applicant would be prepared to enter into a legal agreement with the council for a financial payment towards mitigation services in respect of the third reason for refusal. In addition, the applicant would be prepared to enter into a legal agreement relating to the future management of the ancient woodland. On balance, it is submitted that there are real and positive benefits to the proposals, including 1. A much needed new dwelling of outstanding character and outstanding design. 2. Benefits to the rural economy of the area. 3. Support all the local shops, services and facilities. 4. Improvement to the character and appearance of the area by the removal of the stable building. It is admitted that these real and positive advantages outweigh any perceived harms. Against this background, it is submitted that if the council is minded to grant planning permission, then it is requested that the final decision is left in the hands of the chairman of the planning committee, together with the head of planning services, to grant planning permission once the legal agreements have been entered into. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think I should note that one of our officers, Ms Ward, has joined the meeting. Would you introduce yourself, please, Ms Ward? Just for the sake of the public. Is anyone out there?
Yes, hello there. I'm Nicola Ward and I'm just one of the planning officers listening in on the meeting today.
Right, thank you. I probably needn't have worried, but thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you called this in and you had your hand up very quickly to speak, so I assume you'd like to go first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Okay, I think I'd like to draw to all councillors' attention of certain aspects about this development, which of course is outside of the local development area. It is a large property that's been proposed, but as most people know, if they're familiar with Moat Lane, it's largely a lane of large properties. And I think the size of a property has to be considered in terms of being appropriate with regards to the size of the actual site. I think the site's described as being 0.7 hectares, but for those of us who think of it in terms of acres, it's approaching 2 acres. So this is a fairly big site, and the size of the property would represent less than 10%. So this is a big property, but on a big site. I mean, Fernbrook itself is well over 15 acres, but in a way that's academic. So the site where this property is approaching 2 acres, and proportionately, this doesn't, to me, seem to be a large property.
So sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Jarvis. There was, in fact, a second submission. I neglected to have it read. So I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we do.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hold on.
The Chairman of Wickham Bishops Parish Council. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. And please read it for me.
Thank you, Chairman. Submission 2 from Councillor Richard Mundell, Chairman of Wickham Bishops Parish Council. Wickham Bishops Parish Council recommends that this application should be refused on the grounds of being in an unsustainable location and its conflict with policies S1 and S8 of the Malden Local Development Plan. The site is some distance beyond the village's development boundary. There is no footway from the house to the centre of the village, either up Moat Lane or Witham Road, both roads with a national speed limit of 60 miles per hour. By no definition could this be deemed to be a sustainable location on any of the 3 applicable criteria, and it fails the test in policy S1 of the LDP. The existing property is set well back from both Witham Road and Moat Lane and can hardly be seen. The proposed house would be clearly visible from Witham Road and would be an urbanising intrusion into the rural landscape of the area. It meets none of the exceptions set out in policy S8 of the LDP, which seeks to preserve the intrinsic character of the countryside. It will adversely affect the rural nature of this location. There was a similar application which was refused for many of these reasons. The Parish Council does not believe the new application is materially different in these respects. In conclusion, the Parish Council supports the conclusion reached in the Planning Officer Hannah Bowles' report and supports her recommendation that this application is refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durham, I've got you, but I'm going to go back with humble apologies to Councillor Jarvis, who was mid-flow, and I'm sorry I had to pull you up.
Okay, I'll touch on a few of those points that the officer just mentioned. So the size of the property is quite large. It's on a hill, which is is unusual, but it's on a hillside. So you will see that in certain aspects, it is actually 3 stories. But from looking at it from Fernbrook, and I have been to the site, you will only see 2 stories. And in fact, so it is a fairly large house, but on a large plot. And as far as being built on redundant land is concerned, I mean, I think officers have sort of commented on this. Look, there is a stable there is a menage. This is all being built on land. It's not chopping any trees down at all. This is, I think the occupier used to ride a horse, doesn't ride a horse anymore. The horse is being disposed of. And so this is essentially, as far as I can see,
Councillor Jarvis, I'm going to need to stop you. I've just had been informed, apparently there's no live stream.
Oh, heavens.
Which means we can't, nothing we've done is of any value at the moment.
When did it go? Do you know, Matt?
No, I don't even know if that.
Okay.
Sorry to.
It's a bit like a dress rehearsal, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, because as we know from discussions previously, if we don't have the website working,
it's not a public meeting.
It's not on the website or something. Apparently, the link is not on the website or something.
Oh no! Hang on, let me go away and have a look.
You spoke very clearly, Carl.
Thanks. Oh, I've got a bit more left. Yeah. What do you want me to do, Chairman? There's no point continuing this.
We've got to adjourn because this isn't a valid meeting if we're not live streaming.
Just to be clear, I've got more points to make, Chairman, obviously.
Understood. Well, unless we find out, we might have to go back to the very beginning. Does anybody know? Katie, how are you doing?
I believe it is on the YouTube channel. The problem I've got is there is a link that is currently not talking from Modgov to the YouTube channel. So it is being broadcast on YouTube. It's just the link from the calendar in Modgov isn't linking to it. So we will.
Would that only be the
just-
members? Would that only be elected members that are not able to see it then, or is it?
Well, if a member of the public went to the calendar, they wouldn't be able to click
Right,
on the
yeah.
link and watch it. If they
So we need
went
to get
to
that
the
solved.
Malden District Council YouTube channel, they would.
How
We are
about the, we're actually going to have to contact Simon about this. Because I don't want to, we can't hold the whole meeting and make decisions and then find
Well,
we.
it's the planning agent that's informed us that he can't see the meeting. So
Chairman, I'm watching it on YouTube, but whether there was advance
Can
notice
people
of that,
find it? Can people find
well,
it?
that's the major issue.
I'm just having a look to see if it's on our web page as distinct from mod.gov, because I'm not sure how many members of the public even know mod.gov exists.
Well, my understanding is it's a planning agent that's highlighted to us that he's able to see the committee. Someone who's got an item here.
Right. Hang on, click here to view the live recording. Oh, there's a lag. I'm going to turn myself off. I hate my voice. The link on our website as distinct from mod.gov works. And if we're saying...
Chairman, I understand everything is working.
But we...
Berna?
I didn't even know we had... Yeah, seen Tara, thank you. Oh, officers. Tara, what do you think? Should we carry on?
Councillor Thompson, everything is working now at the moment. This is Berna.
Yeah, gotcha, Berna. I think we should carry on.
And the link on the YouTube homepage is working, so there should be no problems.
Okay, if agents and their applicants are trying to watch and not managing to, I think we'd know.
Okay, Chairman, shall I continue?
It's an agent that's highlighted this to us.
What, that he can see? She can see? Can't see?
Yeah.
The agent, where the web link wasn't on our committee page, he couldn't access the YouTube channel, so I have advised him to go onto YouTube and view it that way. But I just wanted to let someone know that it's not on the website for easy access.
Can we just, I might need those words after all, Tara.
Chairman, I've rewound the YouTube feed and it does go right back to the start of the meeting, so it has been accessible from the start of the meeting.
Understood. My only worry is that if an agent who's obviously interested in at least one of these applications couldn't find it, are we open?
Chairman, can we confirm if the agent can now have a link, has got a link? No?
I'm just waiting for him to confirm.
Okay.
Is Simon in the building? Can someone ask Simon? Quelch,
could I just also comment? I mean, if some part of the meeting had been missed, assumably that may well be an issue.
Oh yes.
Even if it may be working now.
Well, Councillor
Darling
just said you can wind it back to the beginning, so it is all available.
But I
and the
think
link
the
is
issue
available from, I mean, I got there from the MDC website. But are people going to know how to work that out?
Because we have a number of links.
There
are links all over the place. I mean, I'm, in my own mind, I'm happy to carry on, but I don't want to get us into legal difficulties. So, could someone, Tara, maybe, to try and contact Simon Welch?
Chairman, I'll contact Simon.
Thank you. To any members of the public who are able to, are we still streaming this bit? Or are we adjourned? I did say we'd better adjourn. I didn't say we did.
It's still streaming on YouTube, Chairman.
I don't think we resolved to adjourn it yet, Chairman.
No, okay.
Chairman, just for clarification.
I think we should adjourn. I think we should resolve to adjourn it. Is that what you were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, just for clarification, I think there hasn't been a problem with the streaming. The problem has been one of the links to the stream.
Yeah,
but I realise
think you're right.
That's absolutely it. Point, yeah. That's absolutely it. So, members, I am going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes, which takes us on yeah, 10 minutes. I think that takes us to 1:35. So if anyone does want a comfort break or a cup of coffee or anything, I will remain in the meeting. Hello and welcome back to this meeting of North West Area Planning Committee. I'm reopening the meeting as I said I would at 13:35. We've been advised that we're from our legal advisor that we are safe to carry on. I understand that everyone who was querying whether they could get into the meeting is now in, but and it is all on the YouTube channel, but for completeness and clarity, I'm actually going to begin again at the beginning of item 5, which is the application for land northwest of Fernbrook Hall, Moat Lane. So I will call on the officer to present the item in a moment, and we have 2 submissions, both of which will be read by our officer, Mr. Johnson. Okay, so Ms. Bowles, report please.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the demolition of an existing stable block and the construction of a 5-bedroom detached house. Here we've got the location plan. You can see the site outlined in red. We've got the block plan. This is the existing dwelling on the larger site and the proposed dwelling. Got the proposed site layout. The existing stable block proposed to be demolished. Front and rear elevations of the proposed dwelling. Side elevations of the proposed dwelling. Proposed floor plans. You've got a basement level, ground floor level and first floor level. We've got some site photographs. The stable block and menage is where the proposed dwelling will sit. Got some of the surrounding area here. The application is a resubmission of a previously refused scheme. The previous reasons for refusal related to the unsustainable location of the proposal and the impact on the character and appearance of the area. The main amendments to the scheme relate to the design, appearance and scale of the dwelling. The amendments are not considered to have addressed the previous concerns raised. The application site lies outside of the defined settlement boundary of Wickham Bishops in an unsustainable location. The proposed development is remote from community support facilities and would facilitate unsustainable transport patterns. Furthermore, the development would have an urbanising effect on the rural character of the area and would result in an unwelcome visual intrusion and encroachment into the rural countryside. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, Mr. Johnson, submission 1, please, which is from Mr. Stent speaking for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It is emphasised that the proposed dwelling does not fall within the ancient woodland. The ancient woodland is fenced off from the existing access drive and no pedestrians will enter the woodland. The previous refusal of planning permission for a dwelling on the site did not refer to any harm being caused the ancient woodland. There is no reason why this proposal should. Disappointing to see that the report makes no reference to the offer by the applicant to enter into a legal agreement with the council to conserve and manage the woodland. Such an agreement is encouraged by Essex Wildlife Trust to conserve the woodland. The proposal dwelling is a well-designed, attractive house, which fits into the natural landscape of the site. The design has been prepared by an experienced chartered architect. The proposal results in a high-quality dwelling. It does constitute sustainable development, and although some use of a motor car is to be expected It would not result in harm to the Council's objectives of sustainable development. A large dwelling of such exceptional quality would not occur in a defined settlement simply because the land allocation in a defined settlement would be developed as a housing estate. Part of the character of Wickham Bishops is the large dwellings built around the outskirts of the village. These properties are not located within the defined settlement. The proposal will deliver a large new dwelling which reflects the local character and natural asset of the area. Although the Council can achieve a 5-year supply of deliverable housing land, this requirement is not a maximum figure. The government is looking to see a robust delivery of housing. The definition of previously developed land, as defined in government advice, refers to the land which is or was occupied by a permanent structure, including the curtilage of the development land and any associated fixed infrastructure. The proposal does constitute previously developed land. The site is a windfall site for which a housing allocation is made for windfall development within the local plan. The proposed dwelling would make a positive contribution to the rural economy of the area and support local shops, facilities and organisations in the village. The existing building on the site is a functional stable building. It is not attractive. The replacement of that stable building with an attractive new dwelling will result in a positive enhancement to the character and appearance of the area. There is a difference in ground levels between the site and Witham Road. 3 dwellings to the north of Witham Road are clearly visible. The existing ancient woodland does provide some natural screening. It is not accepted that this well-designed detached house would result in the urbanisation of the area. The Council has slipped in a third reason for refusal. The previous application for planning permission made no reference to the habitat regulations, which were existing at the time the application was determined. The applicant would be prepared to enter into a legal agreement with the Council for a financial payment towards mitigation services in respect of the third reason for refusal. In addition, the applicant would be prepared to enter into a legal agreement relating to the future management of the ancient woodland. On balance, it is submitted that there are real and positive benefits to the proposals, including 1, a much needed new dwelling of outstanding character and outstanding design. 2, benefits to the rural economy of the area. 3, support all the local shops, services and facilities. 4, improvement to the character and appearance of the area by the removal of the stable building. It is submitted that these real and positive advantages outweigh any perceived harm. Against this background, it is submitted that if the Council is minded to grant planning permission, then it is requested that the final decision is left to the hands of the Chairman, together with the Head of Planning Services, to grant planning permission once the legal agreements have been entered into.
Thank you. Submission 2.
Yeah, submission 2 from Councillor Richard Mundell, Chairman of Wickham Bishops Parish Council Planning Committee. Wickham Bishops Parish Council recommends that this application should be refused on the grounds of being in an unsustainable location and its conflict with policies S1 and S8 of the Malden Local Development Plan. The site is some distance beyond the village's development boundary. There is no footway from the house to the centre of the village, either up Mope Lane or Witham Road, both roads with a national speed limit of 60 miles per hour. By no definition could this be deemed to be a sustainable location on any of the 3 applicable criteria, and it fails the test in policy S1 of the Local Development Plan. The existing property is set well back from both Witham Road and Mope Lane and can hardly be seen. The proposed house would be clearly visible from Witham Road and would be an urbanising intrusion into the rural landscape of the area. It meets none of the exceptions set out in policy S8 of the Local Development Plan, which seeks to preserve the intrinsic character of the countryside. It will adversely affect the rural nature of this location. There was a similar application which was refused for many of these reasons. The Parish Council does not believe the new application is materially different in those respects. In conclusion, the Parish Council supports the conclusion reached in the Planning Officer Hannah Bowles' report and supports her recommendation this application is refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, members, I should point out that the members' update contains references to this application and also the next one. And the next thing to say is the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons as detailed in section 7 of the report. I'm going to put that on the table without committing either way to vote for it, but do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I'll second that, Councillor Bradford.
Right, now we have something to debate. As I said, there is no obligation to vote for your own proposal or for one you seconded. Otherwise, you'd be predetermined. Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you've been so patient, and I'm sorry you've got to take it from the top, but I'd rather think you have.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I was appearing in Groundhog Day for a moment, but here we go. We've heard those reports from the officer and a number of letters. Look, it is a big property, but it is on a big site. I think this needs to be taken into account. Moat Lane is really largely all large properties. That's the character of that particular street. So this is a large property, but going on a site which is nearly 2 acres. It is also, I've observed that the property is at 3 levels from some perspectives, but that's because it's on a hillside. So from Fernbrook, it will appear as a 2-storey property, and it will only appear as a 3-storey property, frankly, if you're actually on the driveway, because I would challenge whether you can see much of the property from the road, as I think was quite apparent from one of those photographs which we saw a moment ago. As far as the where it's being built on a menage and the essentially redundant functional building of a stable. So it's really important to understand that this is not being built in the middle of the countryside, knocking some trees down. This is being built without removal of any trees, and this is being built on essentially land which is previously developed. So I think that's important. It's a good design. I think the officers have sort of commented. I don't think anybody's disagreeing. It's a good design, and it's in keeping, which is very important. I think in keeping with the street scene. Largely in this particular area, the street scene would probably constitute Fernbrook itself as the nearest property, but the design is in keeping with Fernbrook, which I think is an important aspect. I have read, it's got some good green credentials. I felt looking through. And they look to me to be addressing sort of bio issues, habitat issues. I thought some people might have a concern about road access, but there is already a road access which is to the stable block. There's currently a second access road for Fernbrook, which is the road access that will be used for this new development should it get built. So there is no additional road access issue. I think the main issues for objection, which come from officers and also from the local parish, is clearly on the fact that it would be an invasion of the countryside. This is a phrase that's been used, and unwanted visual intrusion. Well, as I say, if we could get the photograph back up of the stable block from Moat Lane, and I'll be, I think, Chairman, if it's possible to have a look at that photograph.
It is, if we could we do that, please?
Look, I'm not saying if you were standing in a ditch and you had a pair of binoculars and you studied it long enough, you probably could spot the stable. But, this is essentially, this is not a property which is going to stand in your face if you're going down Moat Lane. And I go up and down Moat Lane all the time. So photograph bottom left. OK, so spot the stable. Well, you can sort of see it. And this is at a time of year where there's no leaves on the trees, right? So in a situation like that, you can probably just about see it. So for most of the year, you would not see that at all. And even at this time of year where there are no leaves on the trees, you won't see you can hardly see it. So I think to say that's a visual invasion of the countryside is an inaccurate statement. This is not open countryside. This is mass woodland, and there's woodland all around it. And so I don't think from Moat Lane you would see this. From the photograph bottom right there is obviously taken from Whittam Hill, again a road I'm very familiar with. And all I can say is I think to actually see this property, which will be set quite a way back from that boundary fence you can see on the right, that woodland will all stay, no trees coming down, and the property is set quite a bit back. You would have to, I would challenge Parish Councillor Mundell to say that you would see that. I do not believe you'll see this property unless you're literally standing on your seat looking out of your sunroof. I should say there are some properties on Witham Road which are very much in your face, and perhaps, but that's another issue. But this particular property will be shielded by woodland and will be set quite a way back. So I would challenge the concept of being an intrusion on the countryside. The issue of sustainability is obviously a point which both district and parish have mentioned. Of course, we all want properties to be sustainable. But look, yes, everybody's right in terms of nobody in their right mind would probably walk up Witham Road because it's a busy road, but nobody does walk up Witham Road. But what people do, what I do, and what I know people who live in Moat Road do, is they walk up Moat Road and then they walk up Church Road and they go to the shop. People do walk to the shop. Obviously, people also drive, but it's quite walkable to get to the village shop, not up Witham Road, which would be the nearest route as the crow flies, but also it is a busy road. But people would walk up Moat Lane and then walk up Church Road, and they would get to the village shop like that. I know most of the residents in Moat Lane that do that, and I know that the current occupier, I've seen the current occupier do that. And so I think it's a stretch to say that there is no definition which would describe a new property as sustainable, because if they can walk to the shop, I would define that as meaning the new property was potentially sustainable. I'd also just like to make reference, there was a property which councillors will be familiar with at the top, the other end of Moat Lane, which went to inspectors, where it was clearly determined that if a property on the sustainability argument, it was determined that the property proposed development on land next to Little Hill was sustainable, and for the very reasons that it was still relatively near the centre of the village, and also because that property was going to be set back, there was a natural shielding, which meant that there wasn't an intrusion on the countryside. Well, I can tell you, if that's the case for Little Hill, that's definitely the case for the proposed development that's being proposed near to Fernbrook, because there is a massive wood, not just a thin bush line, that would provide some shielding. I'm not aware that anybody... My last point, thank you, Chair. My last point is I'm not aware that anybody's objected. So look, this doesn't overlook a footpath. This doesn't stand in anybody's face. There are no neighbours who've got issues with this. Nobody has objected to this. I understand the parish council objection, but nobody living nearby it has a problem at all with the proposal. So, Chairman, those are my sort of points on this, but to sort of open up the debate, I would like to have the option of coming back and just summarising prior to voting, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, well, you've had about 10 minutes so far, so we'll see how the others go. Councillor Durham I have next, followed by Councillor Siddle, Councillor Keys. I hope I've got that right. So, Councillor Durham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, yes, I have sympathy with Councillor Jarvis's statements there, and nobody can doubt that it's not going to look out of place along Moat Lane. But it's actually rather small in comparison to some of the other properties along there. But there are a couple of points, and I tend to be siding with Wickham Bishop's Parish Council on their views. This is a previously refused application, and again it comes down to policy. And you know, having sat at almost every session over the space of about 18 months at the examination in public for our LDP, I get increasingly frustrated that our policies are basically being ignored. I will, with your indulgence, read from the Constitution on Planning Protocols Part 5, Section 2.5, which clearly says, the LDP is adopted in the interests of the whole community following public consultation. It therefore represents the overall public interests rather than those of individuals or organisations. Councillors and officers must support the Council's planning policies and make decisions in accordance with these. And Section 2.8 goes on to say, while councillors may sense a particular responsibility to serve their ward electors, they have an overriding duty to the people of Malden District as a whole. You know, these policies are there for the protection of the entire district. And as much as we may want to override them, we can't pick and choose which policies we choose to follow and those we choose not to. You know, we can't elect to bring these policies out when it suits us. So, you know, it has to be one rule for one and one for all, I'm afraid. And, you know, this clearly is a new dwelling in the countryside out of the defined settlement boundary, contrary to policy. And, you know, this equally applies to the next item on the agenda. And you know, as I said, you know, the council protocol clearly said you have a responsibility to serve the entire electorate of the Malden District, irrespective of local issues. So I'm you know, yes, I totally agree with nearly everything that Councillor Jarvis has said, but I side with the parish council on this, and I will be supporting the recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Siddle, then Councillor Keys, and then Councillor Bamford. So, Councillor Siddle, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. In terms of this particular property, I can't see how it's increasing urbanisation. There are houses on the other side of Blue Mills Hill, which are far more visible and far more urban. There are properties very, very close to the road. In terms of its sustainability and its access, this property is approximately 100 yards from a bus stop. So even if people did want to get to the village via public transport, they are able to do that via the bus stop, which is just around the corner on Blue Mills Hill. This will have no impact on the woodland. The woodland is not being affected. As Councillor Jarvis has said, this is on an area which has already been developed, so it's using developed land. I feel that the building is of a good design and will fit within the landscape. And in terms of there being no footpaths, yet again, we've had this argument, there are no footpaths. There are no footpaths at my house. There are no footpaths in lots of areas. We live in a rural area, and therefore there often aren't footpaths. So to use that as a reason for refusal is very questionable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Good afternoon. Councillor Siddle and Councillor Jarvis have stole a lot of my thunder, but we live in the countryside. We judge every independent planning application on the merits in front of us. And I think the older ones of us on here will remember, as you go down Blue Mills, virtually opposite Moat Lane, there was a caravan that was then passed as a building permission. We live in a country, we walk on the verge, we don't have street lights. We can get to the shop, as Councillor Siddle said, there's a bus stop down there. There's already a building in the woods. Yes, it houses horses, not people, but I have got no problem with this whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Councillor Bamford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I did second the officer's recommendation that you put to the committee. The reason why I did that is exactly the same as what Councillor Durham has said. The previous application for this site, which was smaller, does not, this new application does not address the reasons for refusal of that previous application. So we've already turned down a smaller house on this plot for reasons as has been pointed out. It's outside the development boundary. It's not on a sustainable location, and it's contrary to various policies in our local development plan. And those are the points that we need to address here. We can't really now turn around and say, well, this is a larger house, so we're going to ignore everything that we said before, and we're going to agree it. It isn't addressing any of the other reasons that we turned it down before. And so therefore, the officers have got this right. It is against the policies in our LDP, and that's the important point, as Councillor Durham has pointed out. So Madam Chairman, I'm totally in agreement with what the officers have said. They've put in a very good report on this, and I'm happy, as I said before, to second the proposal for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got Mr. Lee would like to speak. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to come back on a number of points that have been raised during the debate. To be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed with some of the comments that have been made by members. The starting point for the determination of any planning application is the development plan. That is the law. That is where we need to, whether it's officers, members, the planning inspectorate, whoever, that is the starting point. Policies have gone through examination in public, they've gone through evidence-based, and as a council, and the council is an entity, it's not just how members or individual officers feel, it's what the council decided is that we have drafted settlement boundaries and that we are trying to provide new residential dwellings within those settlement boundaries or within the allocated sites. If we considered that additional large properties outside of the villages was acceptable, we would have introduced a policy that supported that. As a council, we have not, and a policy does not support that. You know, Councillor Durham, through quoting the actual thing, made reference to the fact that, you know, the decision-making process is in the benefit of the district, and that how, whether it's officers or members, we need to deal with the policies as the starting point. So I won't bother to repeat that because I think he dealt with it better than I would do off the cuff, to be honest. But in relation to some of the specific points, the site is previously development land, but the NPPF highlights that that should be used when it's within a settlement boundary. And as members are aware, this is not within a settlement boundary, and therefore that is, to a certain extent, a moot point. It's not the starting point for consideration, particularly actually as our policies would support the provision of stables and menages in rural areas. Such a position has been put forward by a number of members that because there is a stable on here, we should be allowed to put a dwelling in, is a very, very dangerous statement to make. The fact that there are agricultural buildings or the fact that there are buildings that are acceptable in a rural area or on site, it should be allowed for dwellings is totally contrary to our policies and actually would make an unbelievably dangerous position. And as I said before, every decision is a material consideration in the future determination application, and an inconsistent approach or a worryingly becoming inconsistent approach for members will erode our ability to resist and adversarial applications going forward. So I'm very worried about some of the things I've heard today, to be honest, in relation to applications of policies and the requirements. Our policy states that anything outside of settlement boundary is the countryside, and countryside is not just made up of beautiful rolling fields. It is made up of woodlands. It is made up of agricultural buildings. It is made up of cacophony of different types of sites, but it is not made up by large dwellings. And the fact that there may be certain dwellings within sites, certain dwellings within areas, whether they're sustainable, whether in their flood risk, etc., the fact that they're there does not automatically mean that additional development should be allowed when it's contrary to policy. Classic example is flooding. Before PPS 25 was introduced in the early noughties, there was no requirement for flooding in planning decisions, so you wouldn't have been worrying about it. So just because houses are in flood zones doesn't mean we can allow more, and that goes for the same in unsustainable locations. Just because there are dwellings that are in unsustainable locations does not automatically mean that we should allow additional ones. And I think quite importantly, I'm sure members familiarise themselves with the appeals that come in, and so they are circulated them. But end of last week, an appeal was received in relation to Hackman's Lane in Clarks, and I think that's quite an important decision because actually it reflects, in terms of the points of this application. And this application was refused on a number of points. One of them, though, being the character of the area, and one of them about the sustainability of the location. The inspector actually found that that application was acceptable in design grounds because, for want of better words, it was an infill development. But the inspector still said that this site, because it's remote from day-to-day facilities and the need to rely on a car, that was unacceptable. So it's a multifaceted approach. So even if you do not think the dwelling is going to particularly erode the rural character of the area, that doesn't automatically make it a sustainable location. and we've consistently refused applications when they are in relatively close proximity to a shop or a bus stop with limited resources, because that is not sustainable in the big picture. And such an approach erodes our ability to defend other sites. And this is something that we are consistently winning at appeal, and I'm very worried about members' statements today that completely go in the opposite direction to everything the officers have been doing since the adoption of the LDP in relation to our policies, what members have been doing at planning committees, and the appeals that we have been winning based on those decisions, because these are such generic statements that have been made. I'm really worried, to be honest. Statements such as "we live in the countryside." Well, some people do, yes, but the policy allows for that, and that allows for dwellings in certain instances, while in other instances it doesn't. And that's the point. We've got to look at what our policy says. And in this case, this is conscious policy. And in relation to Councillor Key's point on the caravan, if I remember correctly, that was where the caravan had operational development occur to it, so it was lawfully a dwelling. And our policy allows for replacement dwellings. So that is not a material consideration in determining this application, because our policy does not. It actually conflicts with our policy, replacement of agricultural buildings with dwellings. I think that's probably most of what was said. And yeah, I hope I've covered all the points.
Well said, Matt.
Sorry.
Well said, Matt. Well done. I've actually got Councillor Durham would like to come back. Councillor Jarvis, you did say you'd like to summarise, so I'm going to leave you to the end, but you will only have a minute at most, because I'm very generous with timing, but that was a long time last time round. So, Councillor Durham.
Yeah, Chairman, Mr. Lee has in no uncertain terms explained the ramifications of this, and we fought very hard for a local development plan to protect the district. And now we're choosing to undermine it, which, as Mr. Lee has said, will not give us the opportunity for refusing dwellings when we want to refuse them. So what we're doing is effectively opening the door. We'll only have ourselves to blame when an application comes along and wins on appeal in a location that none of us around this, around this table, around this meeting, may support. But because we have undermined the policies in the local development plan, I'm really concerned, as is Mr. Lee, and I'm sure the other officers. And if we may as well just scrap the LDP and revert to a presumption in favour of sustainable development, because that's exactly where we're going to end up, and it's going to be a free-for-all. We're concerned enough with the changes to the planning system, which is going to double our required delivery potentially, and those additional 300 plus houses, they're going to be in areas where we don't want them, and we'll have to give ourselves a hearty pat on the back for opening the door to developers. So please follow the policies that the council strove for many months and many hundreds of thousands of pounds into position. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually going to add a two-penneth in that over the course of several meetings I've heard, well, the village is unsustainable, so what's the difference? Well, the point is that we try not to add to these difficulties. Yes, we live in the countryside. Yes, people have to manage without footpaths, but there's no need to add to those. I mean, the only actual solution for an unsustainable village is to flatten it and build it somewhere else. Well, we're obviously not going to do that, but what we do is try very hard not to make it any bigger, not to add to the problem. Mr. Lee, I hope I haven't just stolen your words.
Through you, Chairman. Yes and no. Partly, there was 2 points I wanted to come back. One was on the fact that I don't think I dealt with that matter, and I think you've pretty much covered it perfectly. The other thing I wanted to say was that I've heard a couple of times here and recently the phrase, or very similar to, "I don't have a problem with this." That's not the thought process behind a determination of a planning application. The starting point is the policies. And completely, like, to take it into a perverse situation, you go, well, I don't have a problem with Mr. Smith's amenity spaces annihilated by the neighbour having an extension. It's not about whether or not you have a problem with it personally. you know, I have different opinions and different values for what I consider the robustness of some of our policies are, but that's not for me to do as decision maker, because by law I'm to start with our policies. If material considerations weigh against them, or material considerations weigh in favour of going against our policy, that's fine. And that is, as members know, something that you'll often see in reports, the whole balancing exercise. But just saying I do not have a problem with the development is not a reason for approval, because you need to see why you, as the decision maker, as a knowledgeable reader, the fact is you are not just a member of public making a decision in how you feel. You are here as a knowledgeable reader, an informed decision maker that starts with the policies, adds appropriate weight to material considerations, and then comes to an informed judgment. Then the whole point of the planning system is it is a plan-led system that provides consistency and understanding to the public, and not using appropriate policies or not material considerations and just basing it on how your heart feels, which is unfortunately not the planning system. It's a quasi-judicial process, and that, you know, is just something I'd want to highlight to members. The fact that how you feel about an application, to be honest, is irrelevant. It's just as much as how I feel about it, or how any of the officers feel about it, and how the inspector will feel about it. It's about starting with the policies. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And one other thing I thought I should mention is the fact that there aren't objections. And I'm not talking about this case in particular, but very much in general. People tend not to object because they want to carry on getting on with their neighbours, even if they're not happy about it. And they do rely on the decision maker to make the right decision without them having to say anything.
Chairman, if you don't mind me adding to that, just to confirm that that's actually exactly what the case law says. Basically, the judge said that it is the responsibility of the decision maker to make the correct decision based on policies, and that members of public rely on decision makers making the correct decision, predominantly because they do not want to fall out with their neighbours. So it's not just specifically to this, but generally. But that is what the case law actually says. Is pretty much exactly what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Jarvis, I mean, please feel free to come back on these points, but there are aspects like overdevelopment of the plot, which no one has actually raised a difficulty with, because it is, as you say, a very large plot. So if you could just come back on the matters that other people have raised. Thank you.
Okay, Joan, thank you. Can I just ask, first of all, if all other officers have said their piece, Chairman?
Members, I certainly haven't seen anyone else. Okay, everybody
Okay.
done? We're done. Carry on, Councillor.
Okay, I mean, I noted what Councillor Durham said. Obviously, I'm aware of what the local parish has said. Councillor Durham said we can't pick and choose. But, you know, frankly, I think the whole point of the process we're going through now is that we afford different judgments, different weights to various different elements. So largely, it seems to me that what the planning committee here, or what we do, if it was as black and white as some people have just determined, then obviously there wouldn't be much point in us meeting. So I have to say, I think in a lot of cases, what we're doing is giving weight to various aspects. And I certainly perhaps give, by the sounds of it, I think I would conclude that I give more weight to the fact that it's a good design. You can't see it from any particular aspect. There are no trees being taken out. And, you know, I think it's a sort of property that complements the street scene where it is. You know, I've tried to look, I think it's been sort of portrayed that there's a sort of gut feeling from me or from other councillors that we should just do this. This isn't the case. I've studied this, I've visited the property, I've studied the plans, and I know Moat Lane very well. So I think it's slightly insulting to suggest that this is just a gut feel. This isn't a gut feel. I've actually gone through and studied, and I think that this is an exception. And I think that's what this planning committee is here for, to use our skills and our judgment to add weight. If it was simply up to officers, obviously this committee wouldn't have a function. So I do believe, I respect other people's judgments, other people's comments that they've made, and I respect Matt Lee's comments too. But you know, we are here as a committee to give our judgment as councillors. And so, as I'm sure as you can tell, I'm in favour of this particular property. Each property on its merits. Each property should be considered on its merits. Okay. And in fact, to quote Councillor Durham, we are here to serve the electorate. I absolutely agree. But we're here to serve the electorate, every electorate, even the electorate that are putting up a property which might at first glance appear to be against the local government.
We're rather straight off the point. I really do want to take this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've concluded my comment there.
So, Katie, are you taking the roll call? Are we ready?
Yes, Chairman. So thank you. We are voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. So members, I will take your names in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate if you are for, against or abstain? Starting with Councillor Bamford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
Against.
Councillor Keys.
Against.
Wally.
Against.
Biddle.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That is 3 for and 4 against.
So,
no
Chairman,
abstentions.
need reason for approval. Oh, sorry, no, not yet. If members are
No,
seeking to approve. If members are to, yeah.
Right. Okay, the recommendation falls, but that doesn't make it automatically approved, which Mr. Lee was about to point out. So what we now need is a proposal. I'm actually looking to you, Councillor Jarvis, in all probability, but we should not be just approving this. And I'm going to ask you to look at item 21 of Mr. Stemp's submission, that if the council is, I'm quoting, is minded to grant planning permission, then it's requested that the final decision is left in the hands of the chairman of the committee together with the head of planning services to grant permission once the legal agreements have been entered into. You know, I have to be clear, we haven't got the legal agreements. We should not, and I think must not, just plain grant permission. The other thing is we have to address each reason for refusal, which, well, I've just done the third one, which is the legal agreements. Councillor Jarvis, off you go. Proposal, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So just on that last point first, regarding any legal agreements, perhaps Officer Lee can just clarify. I mean, I think there was talk of habitat agreements or by agreements about the woodland. I mean, those issues can just be put down as conditions on approval. Would that be the way to deal with those, Officer Lee?
Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. No, that wouldn't be the correct way. The only way to garner the RAM's contribution is through a Section 106 agreement. That's why there is that reason for refusal down. So, as with all applications that have been overturned for dwellings recently and ones that are up for approval, the recommendation should be from the committee would be to delegate it to myself, subject to the completion of the Section 106. And on a fairly complex application like this, I would suggest that conditions should be delegated as well, alongside consultation with the chair. The interesting point is the ancient woodland, where officers do not see there's a need for that to be particularly managed through a unilateral undertaking. And to be honest, to sum up to a point pulled out of case law, I think this has almost been put forward as an opportunity to try and buy planning permission, as in you shouldn't be using a Section 106 which is outside or erroneous. Not saying that I'm using that in an appropriate term, just using that in the case law terms, that it would be seen as this was trying to be an offer that would actually go outside what I consider the planning application. I know Essex Wildlife have suggested that, but I don't think it's necessary for us. But then again, we didn't support the application anyway, so if members thought it was necessary, that's up to them.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I mean, Essex, Chairman 3, I mean, if Essex Wildlife have recommended something, it's probably not unreasonable that the applicant and agent have thought that might be something that was useful. But I think, Chairman, it sounds as if those sorts of issues are best left to yourself and Matt Lee to determine. So putting those issues to one side, quite clearly the applicant, who currently lives obviously in the ancient woodland and has done for some time, I understand, you know, he's obviously very concerned and very happy to accommodate any conditions that relate to proper use of the woodland habitat, etc., it would seem. So in terms of reasons for approval, you might have to help me, Officer Lee, which I know might go against the grain a bit, obviously, because you're recommending refusal. But I think I do recognise the very important point that where we are recommending approval for something which is against the local development plan, we should be very clear about the reasons for approval so that we don't set unwanted precedents. I do understand that point. I do believe that it's a good design. I think the design aspects, it's in keeping with the street scene. This is obviously an aspect.
They're not reasons for refusal. The reasons for approval have to address the reasons for refusal, not reasons why you like.
The only way I would be able to say that you'd be able to say the design is a reason for approval is if I'm not sure what the section is. It used to be section 50, paragraph. I can't remember what the paragraph is in the new MPPF in relation to exceptional design. I don't think even the applicant is trying to put forward this as exceptional design, and I'd be very.
I think they use that word, Officer Lee. Actually.
I would be very worried to argue that this is exceptional design, taking into account the guidance of what exceptional design should be. It's a big difference between saying it's an attractive development, or it's appropriate for the area, or it's even a beautiful event. But exceptional design is a unbelievably high threshold that I think we've allowed one in the time I've been here, and we've refused a number and one at appeal. So I think, members should be very careful of the wording that's used because it will set fundamental precedents.
I mean, about your experience, obviously. I mean, obviously, I'm just mentioning things which might be selected. I did see the expression that it was an exceptional design, and I noticed officers hadn't sort of objected to that, and in fact made comments that they thought it was a good, high-quality design. So, but I think in terms of the weights given to the fact that it's the intrusion on the countryside, I mean, I don't think it is. I think we saw evidence from the photographs that it can hardly be seen even when there's no leaves on the trees. So my view, whether you can adapt this as a reason for approval, a reason for an exception, would be that you can't see it. And so from no footpath or from no road, can you realistically see this property? And I think that in itself means that there is not a huge amount of weight, clearly, I would have thought, given to the intrusion of countryside expression that's used. And the other point, if I make the other point, that you can come back on both of them, is in terms of it being sustainable. I did mention a case, Little Hill, where I'm pretty sure the inspector referred to that proposed development as being sustainable, and that is in Moat Lane. And I think and referred there to the fact that it wouldn't be an intrusion and wouldn't damage the street scene because it would be screened off by a hedgerow. And I think, as I mentioned previously, this is screened off by a wood. So I don't know whether you can build something there, Officer Lee, and assist me in putting forward good reasons for making this an exception.
I've got a quick question for Mr. Lee. Did we have a 5-year housing land supply when that other permission was granted? Does anybody know?
Chairman, that's what I'm trying to look up because obviously it's always helpful to have stuff like this before the committee, so we can definitely know.
The threshold is much higher when you have a plan and a 5-year housing land supply.
Does Councillor Jarvis know roughly when this permission was granted that he's making reference to?
I'm sorry, Officer Lee. No, I mean, I know that recently there was a reapproval of potential property development at the other end of Moat Lane, Little Hill. And I remember reading with interest the
granted permission, for want of a better word, a replacement permission, for want of a better word, would be very different to a brand new application to one that doesn't.
Yeah, through you, Chairman. I just remember the specific comments on sustainability, which was my point in raising it, where where the inspector argued that in fact they felt that any development there would be considered as sustainable, and also the fact that they considered that the screening of the hedgerow would mean that there was little weight should be given to the intrusion in the countryside. That's the reason for mentioning that case. And I think both of those aspects are equally true, if not more so, regarding the wood screening. I'm obviously leaving it to yourself, Officer Lee, to try and assist us here in coming up with specific.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Bowles, have you got an answer for the issue? Because I think you may well have dealt with some of the applications around there.
Through you, Chair. Through you, Chair. Yeah. The property that was approved at Little Hill, it was originally approved in 2016, I believe, and it was at a time when we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply.
So the goalposts move when we.
Yeah, because for clarity for members.
Sorry, Mr. Lee.
Clarity members, in times like that, our housing location policies fall away, so there are no settlement boundaries and everything is done as a balancing act, and there is the tilted balance in favour of development because we didn't have a 5-year land supply. So in that instances, the starting place for the termination of plan application is the MPPF, not the development plan. So that would be materially different to this situation and should not be given full weight in the termination of any application subsequently. The only difference would be if, for example, a planning permission was still live or something like that, where then that stamp permission is a material consideration. So those circumstances are totally different.
Yes, and through you, Chairman, I understand obviously, but have you got the comments there that the inspector made regarding sustainability?
Through you, Chairman. No, I haven't, because you've just sprung it on me, for want of a better phrase, 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
But the point is that it's a tilted balance exercise rather than it being that. It fundamentally changes the balancing exercise. So an inspector would have to, weighing up the fact that we have no 5-year land supply, is processing a much more almost forensic analysis of the pros and cons of the development, and weighing in favour the fact that you need to deliver housing when you aren't delivering enough. That is materially and significantly different to the situation we have now, where you're talking about people not having footpaths, limited public transport, and us being able to deliver a 5-year land supply. As always, members, I'm happy to help, but the problem is that sometimes my professional advice is just that's not acceptable. I can't. I'm at the end of the day, the gifts in the decision maker to come up with their own decision, but all I can advise is the weight that we can give to the various material considerations, because as members will know from reading the appeal decisions, inspectors give very limited weight to the appeal decisions that were allowed dwellings outside settlement boundaries before we had a 5-year land supply. That is a consistent approach by inspectors, and I think generally, whether you agree or don't agree with what officers say, a rule of thumb is to see the consistency that inspectors do or don't give weight to different matters, because at least they could be argued to be independent, and the variety of them provides a level of consistency that should hopefully gain some weight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, I don't want to go around in circles.
Sorry, can I paraphrase on that? The thing is, without the 5-year housing land supply outside the development boundary, without it, we have to prove that something isn't sustainable. When we have a 5-year housing land supply and a local plan, the applicant has to prove it is. It's a different balancing act altogether. Yep. Right, Councillor Jarvis, but what we need
Chairman, I'd like to put forward the proposal that the proposed development is of an exceptional design, and that it is in a sustainable location, and that it is not considered to be an intrusion on the countryside in view of the screening afforded to it by the ancient woodland. I mean, I don't want to go around in circles on this.
Sorry,
obviously, that would be my proposal.
I've got to ask, if you can't see it, what difference does it make whether it's an exceptional design or not?
Okay, you've asked me for some reasons, and I've given to you.
I've got to be honest, the use of the phrase that this is an exceptional design, I think, is very dangerous. That has a very significant power, for want of a better phrase, through the MPPF, and I would have grave concerns about using this, because it is creating a very low threshold for what Malden may consider as an exceptional design going forward. And secondly, to say that this is a sustainable area, carte blanche, would then mean that, anything in Moat Lane is sustainable, just because it's got limited view, so we could put 15 houses in a field that you wouldn't really see, is basically what the argument that you're putting forward is. And this is my worry with a lot of the recommendations for refusal that are getting overturned recently, is that there seems to be no site-specific weight being attributed it. It's just eroding our policies and our position, and these are generic responses or generic position statements from Councillor Jarvis that could be regurgitated again and again against us in sites here,
I've got you,
in the southeast, across the district. And members need to be conscious of that when making these decisions, and they need to highlight site-specific reasons why a scheme is acceptable. Generic was, if you want to say it's not visible or hardly visible, and therefore the balance, which is a worry, you know, but I can understand the argument. There's some level of subjectivity, but statements about things being sustainable, statements about things being exceptional design are very dangerous and should not be used willy-nilly. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Durham, I've got you.
Yeah, thank you. We're just going round and round in circles.
We are.
Once again, we've got ourselves into a right pickle. I do recall the one or two occasions where we have granted on the basis of it being exceptional design, and that this although this is acceptable and is not I don't have any problem with it. It certainly doesn't come under the description of exceptional design, and so I think we could say, and again, Mr. Lee has outlined the reasons why it would be dangerous to call the area sustainable, because it isn't under any circumstances. I think we need to just say that on balance, the harm there isn't significant harm, and it's an acceptable design, and that it's replacing an existing building, all of which are fairly tenuous and fairly lightweight. But I don't see us any other option really. We certainly mustn't go, calling it an exceptional design, because as Mr. Lee said, there are pretty stringent criteria for what is exceptional, whether you like them or not. I didn't particularly like the one that we granted, but there you go. So yeah, I just think we need to say that that it isn't going to cause undue harm to the area, and that's about as good as we can get.
Would you ask Officer Lee if that's acceptable?
Mr. Lee, can you work with that?
Agree, Chairman. It's more subjective.
Which is good.
I still have, it still is not particularly site specific, but is stronger than has been. The issue is when you look at the previous reasons for refusal, or the current reason for refusal, to a certain extent, reason for 2 is, there is an erosion of the area, rural area, and that, if you're saying there's limited impact, then obviously that's fine. The provision of the Section 106 obviously makes the 3rd reason for refusal. I do have concerns about overcoming the reason for sustainability. But that's within members' gift. I can't force members to do anything. But
no.
We are in the situation we are at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
I think, Mr. Lee, if we can highlight some of the other properties along Moat Lane. I mean, it's fairly renowned for having, quite a lot of very large breeze block mansions, as Councillor Bass used to refer to them as. I think. So that's about as good as we're going to get. I mean, we've yet again successfully driven a coach and horses through our LDP, and which I'm 100% certain we'll come to regret in due course. But there you go.
Well, okay. Do you support that, Councillor Jarvis?
I'm not trying to cause any issues. I think I put forward my recommendation, but I'm happy to take. I think Councillor Durham has been very constructive there. Obviously, we don't want to open floodgates. I do consider Moat Lane and obviously Officer Lee has given his professional advice as to perhaps a slightly more narrow reasons for supporting it. I'm happy to take advice on that. And if Officer Lee wants to sum up what he feels is the most appropriate in the circumstances, the most appropriate proposal, I'm happy to support that.
It has to be a member proposal.
Yeah, that's
Councillor
the
Durham,
problem.
if that's your proposal, Councillor Durham, will somebody second?
I'm happy to second Councillor Durham's proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, is that your proposal, Councillor Durham? Are you?
Well, I'm uncomfortable proposing it because I think because I'm going to vote against it. But there you go.
Well, there you go.
I don't think we're going to get any better, Mr. Lee. I'm sorry about that.
Through you, Chairman, for clarity and for members' clarity, reason for approval is something that has to come from members. Reasons for refusal, I'm able to put in planning terms when it's broadly discussed and highlight those. A reason for approval has to be clearly outlaid, but this is what the law says, case law says, clearly outlaid by members so that the public can understand their reason for going against the policy. So while members may think I'm particularly obtuse or problematic when it comes to reasons for approval, that's because by law I have to be. It's not that I'm trying to be unhelpful, it's that this has to allow the public to clearly understand why members have gone against officers when coming to their decision. So it is different to when you're talking about conditions or anything like that. Thank you, Chairman.
Understood. So, but is that the valid proposal as far as you're concerned? Well,
I think it'd be about as good as we're going to
rephrase that. Okay, that's the proposal we've got, members. It's been seconded. Could we have a roll call, please, Katie?
Yes, Chair. So we are voting to approve the application contrary to the officer's recommendation with the legal agreements and conditions delegated to officers subject to a Section 106 agreement and in consultation with the Chair. Councillor Bamford.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Against, bizarrely.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'm for.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Mr Thompson.
Against.
Thank you. That is 4 for and 3 against.
Thank you very much. So that is, well, approved subject to delegation of all those other matters to the officers and myself. Thank you very much. So now we go on to agenda item 6, the agricultural barns adjacent to 31 Plains Road, Little Totham. No, Great Totham, I apologise. Just the one submission to follow the presentation, please. Hayley, Ms Parker Haynes. Is that a legacy hand, Councillor Durham? Thank you. Off you go, sorry. I haven't got the present. Yes, I have. Thank you. Can't hear you, Hayley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing agricultural styled outbuildings and the construction of 2 detached residential dwellings with associated landscaping and vehicle parking. The existing buildings have a lawful B8 storage and distribution use. It is also proposed that the land to the north will be restored to open countryside. This application is a resubmission of planning application 20-00062, which was previously refused by members at the 8th of June committee. The scheme in relation to scale, siting and design remains unchanged. Additional documentation has been provided as part of this application in an attempt to overcome the concerns raised from the previously refused scheme. A full breakdown of this can be found in section 3.1.6 of the officer's report, which is pages 29 and 30. This is the location plan. This is the block and parking plan. These are the existing elevations. These are the existing floor plans. These are the proposed elevations for plot 1, which is to the western side of the site. These are the proposed floor plans for plot 1. These are the proposed elevations for plot 2. These are the proposed floor plans for plot 2. These are the existing and proposed street scene elevations. And these are some photographs of the site. The applicant has submitted additional information to correct what they consider to be misunderstandings in the consideration of the previous scheme, and further emphasise that the site is brownfield land and therefore consistent with the government agenda for the redevelopment of brownfield land over other land. It is not considered, however, that this additional information would overcome the previous reasons for refusal or lead the local planning authority to a different position on what is essentially the same proposal. As argued and accepted previously, the proposed development would result in the removal of former agricultural styled buildings which are reflective of the rural area in favour of 2 residential dwellings. The application site is remote from community support facilities and would facilitate unsustainable transport patterns. Furthermore, the development would have an urbanising effect on the rural character of the area and would result in a string of prominent residential dwellings and a dense form of development, contrary to the existing grain of development along this stretch of Plains Road. The proposed dwellings would harm the character and appearance of the rural area, contrary to policies S1, S8, T1 and D1 of the Malden District Local Development Plan and planning principles and guidance contained within the National Planning Policy Framework. Therefore, this application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have this time just the one submission, which is from Mr. Calder, the applicant, and Mr. Johnson's going to read that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members would have noted that this application is a resubmission of the original planning application discussed at May's committee meeting. The applicant noted the discussion between members of the committee and planning officers who raised a number of matters, some of which were based on factual inaccuracies, which the applicant felt undermined the proposed development and ultimately contributed towards its refusal. Members noted that the application site comprises a number of old and tired agricultural style buildings. These buildings are of no architectural merit and do not positively contribute to the countryside. The existing buildings on site are, however, in a lawful B8 use. They may be of agricultural appearance, however, they are not agricultural buildings. During the deliberation, the buildings were repeatedly referred to as agricultural buildings, and members were subsequently concerned that their demolition and replacement with residential dwellings would set a precedent for other agricultural buildings in the district to be replaced with residential development. Officers will know that this would not be the case, as firstly, each application will have to be dealt with on its own merits, and secondly, a precedent can only be set if an identical site stroke scheme came forward for the proposed development. In any case, with the buildings being in B8 use, this would be materially different to any other agricultural buildings, thus clearly not impacting on or setting a precedent for any future proposals for the redevelopment of existing lawful agricultural buildings. We would just like to draw your attention to the loss of employment justification statement that was submitted in support of the previous application and resubmitted as part of this application. During the committee's deliberations, officers repeatedly stated that the proposed development was unacceptable due to no justification for the loss of employment having been provided. This is clearly incorrect. This resubmission has also been supported by an additional chartered independent professional who supported the loss of employment justification statement's findings. Another matter we would like to reiterate is the proposed restoration of the rear of the application site to open countryside, which will inevitably have a positive environmental impact. No reference was made to this, and we would expect that this environmental benefit should, at the very least, be acknowledged. In light of the above, we would ask members to reconsider the individual circumstances of this proposal and the significant positive benefits of the scheme, which includes the removal of the possibility for the site to operate as a storage or distribution centre with no restrictions, and the provision of a sensitively designed development that would be more in keeping with its immediate surroundings, thereby enhancing the character and appearance of the site and that of the surrounding area. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I put the recommendation, I noticed Mr. Lee would like to make a comment. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. For clarity, obviously, just want to make some comments on the applicant submission, obviously, which is heavily laboured around the previous debate. My recollection of these conversations are slightly different to the applicants. I think it was acknowledged that the buildings that were industrial use, but the buildings have, or historically were agricultural, have the appearance of agricultural buildings. Therefore, that is why they were discussed as appearing as agricultural buildings rather than as appearing as employment buildings. And therefore, that was the discussion about the loss of the agricultural buildings and how they have a rural feel, etc. So the actual use of inside of them is an irrelevance, and I think that was something that was discussed, or of limited weight maybe rather than irrelevance. Secondly, in relation to each application is determined on its own merit, so don't disagree with that, and obviously that's always the way, but each decision is a material consideration, and the council's policy does not support loss of agriculture or loss of agricultural buildings for residential sites either way, so that would still be a material consideration that would be of equal weight, so I don't agree with that point. And in relation to the employment aspect, while information had been submitted, it was not considered to be fully robust, including lacking the advertisement of the site as required. So therefore, the statement that a full employment statement or support of the policy requirements hadn't been met is accurate, because as explained within the officer's report in section 5.2, this still hasn't been met. So I just wanted to clarify the points that the agents raised and just say that my recollection is very different to that, and just wanted to put forward my 2 pennies worth. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, I'll move to the recommendation, which is to refuse for the reasons detailed in section 8 of the report. I need to remind members that there is an update on this one, which was emailed to you earlier and is on the website as well, so I'm sure you've read it. Would someone second this so that we've got something to debate?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Siddle, you called this in, so let's come to you first, unless you'd rather take a different turn.
No, I'm quite happy to go first, Chairman. Thank you. The reason why I called this in is I called it in the last time as well, is I feel that in terms of this particular site, this isn't some kind of twee farm. It's not a farm with some nice barns that weatherboard and a traditional Essex style. This is several concrete with asbestos probably in them buildings, and then behind that a huge range of broken down wooden buildings which serve no purpose at all. So in terms of the site being agricultural, it is classified as a business. It is more industrial than agricultural. So therefore, in terms of any urbanisation and in terms of converting these buildings into 2 properties, I think there will be less urbanisation if we take that approach. The transport issues come up again in terms of the reasons for refusal. In terms of the distance between this site and the bus stop, it's 0.4 miles, not 0.7 miles, as specified by the officers. And as I stated, I think last time, the transport requirements for a business and operating from there would have a huge effect rather than 2 reasonable sized residential properties. These new properties aren't dense. They are well close, separated. And also in terms of the land behind it, it's again less urbanised because they are restoring land to countryside as a result of the properties. In terms of design, this development and the look of this development is exactly the same as the properties that are further up the road. So we're not talking about building on a field, we're not talking about building on land, we're talking about redeveloping brownfield site, which is part of what the government wants us to do. Yes, it is outside the settlement boundary, but I feel that because it's redeveloping brownfield site, that outweighs that particular thing, and it will enhance the rural area. That's it.
Thank you. I do have a little reminder that I appreciate some of us are in rather remote areas and we don't have the bandwidth to use our video, but if we could, that would be appreciated, I think, by members of the public. Right, I have Councillor Durham next.
Thanks very much indeed. I can't disagree with anything Councillor Siddle has said, and if ever there was an application that deserved to go against the LDP, it's probably this one. To say that that site has little architectural merit, I think, is being kind to it. It's an eyesore, and I don't think anybody will say anything else. And you know, what is proposed will indeed be an improvement, but I have to fall back on our policy situation, I'm afraid. And at the moment, and I sort of say at the moment, it's contrary to policy. So you know, I can't be hypocritical and go for this one, whereas I've objected to others on the same principle. But so yeah, it would be very nice to see that this particular site tidied up. But yeah, it's contrary to policy, and I'm afraid, as Mr. Lee has said, everything has to start and should finish with policy, although that hasn't happened in the past. But thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Actually, I don't believe there's anything in planning law that stops the site being cleaned up. It doesn't need planning permission for something else to make that happen, I don't believe. Anyway, I have Councillor Jarvis next. Anyone else, could you put your names on the chat, please?
Sorry, Chairman, did you ask for me then? I didn't quite hear you.
I did. You're next on the chat.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, I noted what Councillor Durham said then, and I think what he said was right, up to the point where perhaps, in one way, perhaps some people feel entirely constrained by the policy. I mean, I think each case on its merit. In this particular case, I don't think anybody would suggest that site looked a complete mess, and obviously what's being proposed would look much more appealing. And so I find it fairly easy to support this particular application. And in this particular case, as I say, each case on its merit, I'll let others speak, but that would be how I feel about it, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bamford next. And indeed last, unless anyone else would like to add to the list.
You want me to speak, Chairman?
Yes, please, when you're ready. When you're ready.
Thank you. Well, I have a lot of sympathy with this. And as Councillor Jarvis has said, each planning application on its own merits. However, we do have a local development plan, and as it says in the report, the government are encouraging development of brownfield sites for housing, but only if they're within the settlement boundary. And unfortunately, this site is outside of the settlement boundary. So, you know, we've got to take all these points into account. We can't just dismiss them because we want to tidy the site up. And as the chairman has quite rightly said, there's nothing to stop them tidying the site. I mean, if we were to say, well, every untidy site that's outside the development boundary can be built on, which is basically what we would be saying if we agree to this, then, you know, there's no point in bringing these matters to a planning committee, because we're just going to go against all the policies in the local development plan and against the national planning policy framework. So I think we've got to think about these points, you know, the laws that govern planning, and not just about our emotions and our thinking that it would look better if we agreed it. So you know, I do, as I said, have sympathy with this one, but it's against our LDP and it's against the NPPF, so I can't agree to it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Oh, hear me? I'm the other ward member, and I totally support what Councillor Siddle's done. You know, I had said my bit last time, there's no point in saying it all again. It is a rural area, and yeah. No, I've got nothing to say. It was all said last time. Everybody can listen back to what I said before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keys. Right, I have no one on my list to speak after Councillor Keys. Mr. Lee, would you like to come back before we go to the vote?
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll just get my camera on for everyone's disappointment. Obviously, a few members have raised some points. Firstly, one of the points I'd like to raise is that obviously, to a certain extent, there is an allowance for rural diversification within policies and employment uses within the rural areas. Obviously, this is very different to the provision of residential dwelling, which is just contrary to policy. Furthermore, stating that government guidance clearly states brownfield should be supported within settlement boundaries, and then going, this is outside of the settlement boundary, and therefore it's in accordance with this, is not something we can say, because that's clearly conflicts with exactly what the NPPF says. And you know, this is an application that was refused by this planning committee only 3 months ago. This has not been changed. This has had a very limited, and I've been very limited, level of additional support information and some criticism of officers, rather than actually an amendment to the scheme. You know, the point is, you know, to really row back, applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. As members know from advice from officers and from appeals that have been made, something of significant weight is a previous decision. This committee only 3 months ago refused this application. Whether or not you agree with on whether or not how you voted at the last committee to a certain extent becomes a moot point. Your starting point as a decision maker is with the law, is with the planning process, which is, what does the policy say? What weighs in favour or against the proposal? This is no different to when officers get an application in after an application has been refused, overturned and refused. Our starting point then becomes the reasons for refusal. What members need to be looking at as decision makers is, have the reasons for refusal from the committee decision, and I'll emphasise that again because sometimes members like to think there's a difference, but there isn't, a committee decision only 3 months ago. Have those reasons for refusal been challenged successfully, and has additional information or amendments been made to overcome them? As stated, there are no amendments to the scheme, and there's a rather minor additionality in relation to the employment and some criticism of officers. I do not think that these go to the heart of the reasons for refusal previously, and that should be the fundamental basis of this application. And that's even before we move on to the value of the decision, because you know, you may well see applicant items that are recommended for refusal at committee after a previous refusal that officers might not agree with, but that's how the planning system works, and that would still be our recommendation. And so that's just for a point of clarity. I think Councillor Bamford and Durham referenced a lot of the points, you know, that maybe I would have covered, and as Councillor Key said, we've probably discussed a lot of these points at the last item, so there's no point repeating them carte blanche. But just to emphasise on something that Councillor Bamford said, the site, you know, I don't disagree the site is untidy, but as we discussed this extensively 3 months ago, you know, the buildings and sites have a natural life and they move through them. There is no need for planning permission to improve that or to repair it. There's no evidence to say that this couldn't come back as a new employment site, because they have not evidenced that. That's one of the policy requirements that they haven't done. But a statement that's saying that basically because an industrial site or an agricultural site, etc., is untidy, it should be allowed to go to housing, is unbelievably dangerous. Partly because it can be regurgitated across the district, but also it's encouraging people that have sites to let them get into a state of disrepair, because then we're going to allow them. There is nothing in our policy that backs up that position. There is nothing in our policy that backs up such a direction of travel, which could be used firstly against us as in just a general position, but actually proactively manage to deliver something that would actually go against what our policies state. I think I've probably covered most of the points, or that also, as I said, Councillor Durham and Bamford have covered as well, so I won't keep up anyone's more time. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, Katie, could we take the vote, please? I haven't got anyone else asking to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. So we are voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. Members, I will take your names in alphabetical order, please. If you could state for, against or abstain. Thank you. Councillor Bamford.
For.
Councillor Durham.
For.
Jarvis.
Against.
Keys.
Against.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Siddle.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
3, 4 and 4 against. No abstentions.
Okay, members, here
For
we go
clarity,
again.
I'd like to highlight, obviously, the slight difference with this application is that members' reason for approval is going to have to deal with the fact that it was refused as well 3 months ago by this committee. And obviously, otherwise that would be a payable decision which would be potentially challenged. So I'd advise my members to take that into consideration.
Councillor Siddle, I think we're probably looking for a proposal from you unless someone else has got one.
So now my proposal is that we approve this application, the reasons being S8, the reuse of a redundant or disused building that would lead to an enhancement to the immediate setting. D1, built environment, a positive contribution and to the natural environment on policy F. Is that good enough?
Oh, it's not up to me.
Through you, Chairman, my advice would be in one word, no. Firstly, this is not reuse of redundant building. And secondly, policy S8 lays down a number of criteria that where we will support redevelopment of sites, and none of them are market housing. And to reference the appeal decision that I've made reference to earlier, from only last week, from the 18th of September at Hackman's Lane, that is exactly what the inspector said. So actually the use of S8 is a very, very dangerous point, because nowhere in that policy does it support the provision of market housing, and that is what this scheme is for. So my advice to members would be that that is not the correct direction of travel, as it completely just throws the LDP under a bus, for want of a better phrase.
So what about D1?
D1 is a subjective point in relation to design.
So all planning is subjective, Mr. Lee.
That's not correct, no, unfortunately.
Not across the
Sorry, Chairman, I apologise. But no, because some points are quite clear. Has evidence been submitted, yes or no? Such as, has this property been marketed for a period of time? No. So that's not a subjective point, for clarity. Design is subjective, but none of those points, or any of that point of just saying that the site is arguing, is not challenging the fact that only 3 months ago this planning committee refused this application. That is the intrinsic part. As decision makers, we need to be starting from those reasons for refusal from 3 months ago and looking to see what has changed. A personal opinion, whether it's, as I said, even my professional or my, just because you do or don't agree with something, isn't, whether it's a policy or that, it becomes a certain of a moot point when there's planning history on a site, because that becomes the starting point for the decision-making process. And that is where this one is very fundamentally different to the last item we just had. We need to drill into what has happened in the last 3 months that means that the reasons for refusal that the council considered were unacceptable are now fallen away. And the fact that members voted for or against it last time is an irrelevance. Just like if, for example, you didn't like a scheme and then it was allowed at appeal and they came back for a slight amendment, your recommendation would be that you'd have to support it. Or if it was refused on 2 reasons, only one of them stood up at appeal and they came back, we wouldn't be able to use that previous reason for refusal as a new reason. So we have to look at, as a starting point, is the planning history of this site, and what you've stated is based on a certain level of subjectivity in relation to D1. A policy S8 which isn't usable because it actually is totally contrary to policy S8, so that actually is unhelpful for your position as it's a reason for approval, but none of that challenges why it was unacceptable 3 months ago but is now acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
So the constitution of this council is different to this committee, is different to what it was 3 months ago. There are different members attending this time to last time, so therefore the different members have come with different views and we've got a different decision.
Through you, Chairman, unfortunately not. that's the fact, is that just like when members make a decision and an application comes back, that's the starting point for officers. That if members come and go, officers come and go, but it's the council's decision, and your starting point as a decision maker, as just like it is with mine, is the policies and material considerations such as the previous history of the site. The fact that you like it or don't like it, whether it's approval or refusal, or it's irrelevant. It isn't just about the fact that the committee membership has changed. You need to look at the reasons for refusal and why what's happened different, because otherwise my advice to you as a professional, my professional advice to you as a decision maker is that you should be starting with the reasons for you shouldn't be turning up at this committee to look at this item il nuvo. You need to be starting, you should have been starting with it from the reasons for refusal from 3 months ago.
So my reasons for recommendation is that it is a sustainable development and it is going to improve the design and the landscape in that particular area. So I consider it a sustainable development, a sustainable area. It is 0.4 miles from the nearest bus stop. It is enhancing the landscape, it's enhancing the current site, and it is improving the design in that particular part of the village. That's my reason that I put forward as a reason for passing this application.
Okay, while people think about seconding this, can I just ask Councillor Durham?
Yeah, I don't think it was a different committee 3 months ago, unless I missed something. But
well, we're missing 2 people today, but we can't change that.
No, we can't. Okay, was it ostensibly Northwest Area Committee under whatever? Yeah. But I think
I will second it.
Okay, what we need to do, I think, rather than going round and round in circles like we did previously, is start from the standpoint that Mr. Lee suggests. Can we go through the previous reasons for refusal one by one, and then collectively we can try and find mitigations against those? Hopefully we will, and we won't have to sit here all night looking for reasons. But if that's the starting point, I think that's where we should go, Chairman.
Sounds hopeful to me. Any offers, members?
Well, Chairman, perhaps Mr. Lee could read out one by one the previous reasons, and then we'll see where we get to on that. Sorry, Mr. Lee.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Darrell.
They are quite long.
I'm just trying to find them in the report. Have any of the officers got them in front of them, so they can share the screen?
Are they different?
Do you, Chairman? Ms. Haynes, Park Haynes, for clarity, they're the same reasons for refusal, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting.
Through you, Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen because that will show
Please do.
That should be that. So, is everybody able to see that?
Yeah.
So,
I think it's coming up.
Those are the 2 reasons for refusal. Obviously, the second reason for refusal in relation to Section 106, obviously, if members are to support the scheme, we would be saying we suggest that they look to delegate subject to the completion of that agreement. The reason for refusal in relation to the first one
I can't actually see it, Matt.
Can you not? Is that?
No. I have got you, Councillor Jarvis, yes.
Oh, I stopped sharing.
Are they in fact the same? What can you point out the differences, or can Ms. Parker?
There is no differences
at all.
No.
Can we put them back up? Sorry.
Can anybody?
Well, there was one, I think, there that offers a glimmer of hope.
So the application site lies within a rural location outside of defined settlement boundary where policies of restraint apply. The council can demonstrate a 5-year land supply to accord with the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework. The site has been identified by the has not been identified by the council for development to meet the future needs for the district and does not fall within either a garden suburb or a strategic allocation for growth identified within the Malden District Local Development Plan to meet the objectively assessed needs for housing in the district. The site is poorly located relative to facilities, services and sustainable modes of transport. the proposed development would result in the loss of employment use, and it has not been demonstrated that to the satisfaction of the LPA that there is no demand for employment use of this site. Furthermore, the proposal would substantially alter the character and intrinsic beauty of the countryside, particularly through the introduction of a domestic character and dense form of residential development, contrary to the existing grain of residential development in, and I can't see for Councillor Durham, rural area. The development would therefore be unacceptable, and obviously just highlights the policies there because I can't really see. Because obviously I think one of the points that we haven't really discussed is the fact that this isn't loss of employment site. They have not done some of the criteria as the policy lays out that it explicitly states they should do. And every applicant has a right to be treated the same. So if this applicant hasn't done certain points, members will need to highlight why that is acceptable in this instance. Otherwise, it'd be reasonable for every applicant to think that certain points of the policies are no longer necessary to be met, which obviously is a very dangerous position to be in. So if members are to approve this, they need to either highlight the exceptional benefits of this scheme that mean that policies become irrelevant, or why this site specifically doesn't need to meet certain points of policies. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, the only thing I can think about is that the improvement to the street scene, you can argue that it perhaps outweighs all of the other policy reasons why it shouldn't go ahead, because none of us fall out with the fact that it's not, it's definitely going to improve the street scene, whether
Councillor Durham, through you, Chairman, all I would say is if this was 3 months ago, I'd say fine, but this committee refused this 3 months ago, so my advice is that is not a robust.
I'm plucking at straws, Mr. Lee, but that's about the only thing in those reasons for refusal that because nobody's going to say that it's not going to improve the appearance.
The only issue is that 3 months, that's where it's a professional advice is that you're not challenging what's significantly happened in the last 3 months, and that's really where the starting point should be for members in this decision-making process.
So I would stipulate that in terms of the refusal 3 months ago and in terms of the refusal now, the proposal would substantially alter the character and intrinsic beauty of the countryside, particularly through introduction of domestic character and dense form of residential development, contrary to the existing grain of residential development in this rural area. I would dispute any of that was true last time as a refusal. So I would disagree with that as a reason for refusal. And I would say that the opposite is true.
Through you, Chairman, for point of planning law, that's a flawed approach, unfortunately. That'd be my advice. Whether or not you agreed with it last time is not the starting point. And I'm not saying anyone would JR this decision, but these are the sort of scales of applications that have been JR'd here at Malden District Council, and I would say that it's difficult, but I would say that an approach that just is saying that I didn't agree with it last time and I don't agree with it now, irrespective of this application, is not the correct approach to coming to determination of a planning application. You need to be showing that you're being a reasonable in the Wednesbury term. What would the man on the Clapham omnibus say? And if you aren't able to demonstrate that, you probably shouldn't be saying it. And
well, I would say that we are able to say that.
Chairman, I can't disagree with Councillor Siddle, and I can't recall that particular meeting. There's so much has happened in between, but it does seem a bit bizarre that was a reason for refusal the first time round, because
it was agreed. It was agreed, and I seem to recall Councillor Siddle spoke against it, which he's absolutely entitled to do, but that's not the decision that held sway. But I have got Councillor Jarvis waiting to speak, so Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was just waiting for a slot. Yes, I mean, I'm sort of puzzled a little bit. Obviously, I noted the comment that was made regarding the fact that it was refused last time. But if that carries such weight that we're not able to make a different decision, I'm sort of getting my head around why it's coming at all to committee, or why the application were being considered. If that was carrying so much weight that we can't sort of review aspects, it's a bit puzzle. I find that a bit puzzling as a sort of an issue. If we're not allowed to revisit the situation, then it seems a bit unusual to me. I mean, I assume there are some different aspects in the application. Otherwise, why would we be looking at it? But just before,
Joe, do you want me to answer that point for you, Chairman?
Yes, please,
yeah, for clarity. The council only has the powers to return or to refuse to term an application if it's been 2 within the last 2 years. This obviously is the only one, so that's why. But otherwise, and we do use our power to actually decline to determine applications. The reality is, in my personal and professional opinion, is that the applicant should have gone to appeal rather than resubmitting to us. Yeah. This is an attempt to see if the committee will come to a different decision to previously, which it shouldn't be doing. It should be going to appeal and let the inspector determine. Is my professional opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Officer Lee. So, Chairman, I was still slightly confused there because obviously it seems to be that the application has come to us with a view, as Officer Lee just said, to see whether the council would make a different decision. And from what I've heard, a number of councillors would be keen to make a different decision. And so I'm still a little bit concerned as to whether we're being told we can consider it or not. But certainly, I think from what I've heard from a number of councillors, we all agree it's a pretty ugly site, and and some of the comments that were clearly made last time, I don't recall it. The fact that it's sort of intrusion on the countryside, it's obviously an ugly site, and it would be good to put something better there. I don't believe it's sort of mass urbanisation that we're talking about. It would improve the intrinsic value of that countryside, looking at a few nice properties rather than the ugly tin shacks that are there. I think most people seem to think that would be right. The only other point I'd like to make is just on the loss of employment. It sounded as if there was a technicality whereby the applicant perhaps could have confirmed the details regarding loss of employment. All I can say is I hope nobody's still working there because it looks pretty derelict to me, but perhaps I've misunderstood that point. Thank you, Chairman.
I think you probably have. I mean, the point is part of the policies are that certain advertisements and criteria have to be made and met, and they haven't been, just like with removing, for instance, the agricultural tie from the dwelling. You can't advertise it for a month and say, well, I've advertised it. There are rules about how long. And it could be the site could be repurposed with different buildings. I have Councillor Morley's hand up. Councillor Morley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My point was a bit like Councillor Jarvis. When was it actually last used for industrial or employment? And is it likely to be really as well? Thank you.
We don't know. That's the trouble.
Yeah, Chairman, I don't know when it was done. Whether or not it's likely to be, we don't know because they've not done the due diligence that we require for our policy to give us the answer. That's the point. They've not marketed it. The site should be marketed at a reasonable rate, and potentially someone may wish to redevelop it or improve it. We don't know though. That's one of the worries I have is that with this approach being taken on this site such as this is twofold. One, it's a bit tatty, it's a bit degenerated, it doesn't matter. And the second one, it's not in a great state. Well, no one's automatically going to want to use it. Therefore, it doesn't matter because that's two very key strands of policies that are just. The reality is that may well be true, but we need evidence. Planning is based on evidence. It's not a heart, it's a head-based process, as I said earlier. And the evidence hasn't been provided to us. And that's what my concern is. This is just going to make defending other sites, and because why is it in this instance acceptable not to provide the relevant evidence and to demonstrate there's no need when in other sites we argue there is? And without having some specifics for this site, it's a worry because, as I've said before, and I'll say again, when appellants show an inconsistent approach by the council, the inspector normally falls on the side of allowing the appeal, not dismissing the appeal. And to be honest, I'm worried about the amount of inconsistencies that are coming through at the moment and the ability for the council in the next number of months and years to be able to robustly defend appeals with what's happening recently. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bamford, but the site would be greatly improved by a nice stand of trees and some grass. As far as I know, there wouldn't be any great difficulty with doing that. I mean, there's no obligation to fill it with houses just because we don't like the look of it. Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just trying to help really in trying to establish something had changed in the last 3 months. And I'm just looking at the report in relation to policy E1. I know you've said that they haven't given any evidence, but the policy...
Could you give us a paragraph?
Yeah, it's 522 on
Got it, thank you.
page 6. No, not page
33.
33, is it? 522. Yeah, and it, you know, these 3 parts, it says that the whether the sites are designated or undesignated will only be considered if the present use and activity on site significantly harms the character and amenity of the adjacent area, or the site would have a greater benefit to the local community if an alternative use were permitted, or the site has been marketed. Well, you said that the site hasn't been marketed, but could we not say that those 2 other points are significant in this case? I'm just trying to establish something that might have happened in the last 3 months.
Through you, Chairman.
I don't actually agree with agreeing this, as you know, but I'm just trying to help.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee. Clarity, yeah, I'm quite happy to try and help, but you know,
all hands to the
as
pump.
we know, there is no use on the site at the moment, so there is no harm in noise disturbance, etc., from the site, and I don't think we could argue anything's particularly changed in that respect in 3 months. In relation to point 2, I would advise with all my professional being that we do not say that residential use is better than employment, because otherwise you've just literally said we'll have any employment in the district on any site. So please do not go down with that route, members. I beg you, and it's not rare that I'll do something like that. And in relation to the third one, obviously that's about the points of needing evidence, which they've just not given us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think we might be back with you, Councillor Siddle. I mean, in the end, it's your proposal, and you know, at some point, it's almost anything we say will be used against us at some point. But it's, you know, it's your proposal. If you spell it out to us, and you can get a seconder.
So I the reasons that I feel that we should, I'll go back to my original reasoning, is that we should pass this application because it would improve the natural environment by restoring land to countryside. It would improve the visual impact and the street scene in the area. It would improve the built environment and provide a positive contribution to the surrounding area. Those are my reasons. That's what I said. That. And that's all D1. D1.
Thank you. Well, that sounds clear enough to me. Thank you. You've got a seconder in the shape of Councillor Keys. Anything about conditions? Can we leave conditions to delegated to the officers in conjunction with myself and the board members, one of whom is you, Councillor Siddle, obviously, and the section 106. Well done. Thank you, Mr. Lee. So is that agreeable to you, Councillor Siddle? I'll include both of you as ward members.
Yes, and obviously the wildlife side is important.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Katie, could we have the roll call for the vote, please?
Yes, Chairman. So we are voting to approve the application contrary to the officer's recommendation with the legal agreements and conditions delegated to officers subject to a section 106 agreement in consultation with the chair. Councillors, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. Please can you state clearly for, against or abstain? Starting with Councillor Bamford.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Jarvis.
Councillor Jarvis.
Sorry, Chairman. Just needed to tune in there. 4.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against.
That is 4 for, 3 against, and no abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is approved, subject to certain matters being delegated to the officers, the chairman of the committee and the 2 ward members. So moving on, that's our final planning application, I think, 22 the Glebe Purley. We have 2 submissions which will be read after the presentation by Mr Johnson. Thank you. So Ms Parker Haynes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can everyone see that?
Not, yes, I can. I was going to say not yet, but I can.
Thank you. Planning permission is sought for the construction of a dropped curb and vehicle crossing to allow access using the side and front garden as a driveway. This is a resubmission of the previously refused application 20-00221, which was refused as the development would be an incongruous feature within the street scene, whereby such features are largely absent along this section and the southern side of the glebe. Under this application, the driveway will be constructed of grasscrete. The dropped curb has increased in width by 0.3 metres and additional information has been supplied. This can be found in section 3.1.4 of the officer's report, which is page 55. This is the location plan. This is the proposed block plan. This is the block plan from the previous application, just to show that it has increased in size. And these are photographs of the site. Whilst it is acknowledged that the provision of on-site parking would be desirable by the occupiers of the dwelling, it is considered that these benefits are outweighed by the harm and the impact of the development to the character and appearance of the area. The proposed amendments to the scheme are acknowledged to result in a more sympathetic development than that of the previous proposal. However, the alterations are not considered to overcome the harm identified. Therefore, it is recommended that planning permission is refused on this basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr Johnson, please. Submission 1 from the supporter and submission 2 from the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Submission 1. We are residents of Purley who live adjacent to this proposal of a drop curb leading to a future driveway. We feel strongly, as well as other neighbours here, that it would be very beneficial having 2 less cars being parking on this sometimes busy road. My wife and 2 young children have to frequently cross this section of road on their way to school or park, and the view of oncoming traffic can be obstructive by cars being parked on the side of the road. Thank you, Chairman. Just apologies for the slight mispronunciation sometimes in how it's written. Submission 2 from the applicant. I wish to clarify several aspects of our application that have become confused and or misrepresented. We are not a detached property, and there is no hedging to either our northern or western boundary as stated in the report. The application seeks approval to add a dropped curb and crossover. The materials listed and indicated on the plans are as suggested by the pre-application advice. The character, appearance and function of the grass verge will therefore be largely preserved, as the materials will allow much of the grass to grow back in a short period of time. The appearance of the replaced area will be restored to that of a grass verge. The proposed parking area on our property will accommodate 2 vehicles, not the 1 vehicle as referred to in the report. Consequently, reducing the need for on-street parking even further. The proposed parking spaces on our land will be constructed within permitted development rules. The area of the proposed drop curb and crossover is 4.5 metres by 6.5 metres, part of which is already tarmac for the footpath and is less than noted in the report. There has also been downplaying of recent planning decisions which might support our application. The crossover at 30 The Glebe was approved in 2004. The report fails to mention that an application in respect of 31 The Glebe was approved by Malden District Council on the 1st of September 2020 to create a crossover to their property. This will result in the loss of verge and without the ameliorating effect of constructing the crossover using gascrete or similar. Our full response to the refusal of our first application has not been included in the report, and copies of these have now been forwarded to the Ward Councillor, Miss S. White, and the clerk for the committee's information. Finally, in light of the above, we would invite the committee to reject the officer's recommendation and to approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Do either of you officers, any of you officers, want to make any comments before we go to the recommendation? I'm with you, Councillor Morley. I'll come back. If not, then I will put the recommendation, which is to refuse for the reasons as detailed in section 8 of the report. Do I have a seconder to get that on the table? Nobody. Okay. Then I need a proposal, please, from someone else. Otherwise, we have nothing to debate. Unfortunately, this.
I'll second it, Maddie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I was waiting for someone else to speak. I thought, oh, nobody has.
I can't emphasise enough that it does not obligate anyone to vote for either their proposal or their seconding, because they haven't heard the debate yet. So how could they? Thank you so much, Councillor Siddle. Right, we have something to debate. Is the recommendation to refuse. As I say, unfortunately, this was called in by one of the ward. I don't mean that bit's unfortunate. Unfortunately, the ward member who called it in isn't here, nor is the other ward member. So, who'd like to go first? Councillor Morley. Sorry, you did pop your hand up before.
Yes, sorry, I'm all fingers and thumbs here. I do apologise. The reason for refusal, is it not better to have cars off the road then, or is that it seems advantageous really to have them off the road, as the applicant was saying?
On the face of it, absolutely. Could we see the photographs again, please, Hayley, Ms. Parker-Haynes?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, of course.
Because I'm not familiar with this road, and
Chairman.
Do you want me to show you how to get a lorry through there, Councillor Morley?
I won't make a comment, Councillor Keys, about my friend who's a lorry driver. You'd have probably just gone through the vehicles, but that's a different conversation. But I just wanted to comment on Councillor Morley's point. The reason for refusal is in relation to basically aesthetic appearance, the erosion of the grass verge. But what I'd also like, as the officer's report explains, while there's the members of the public saying they would be could accommodate 2 cars, in our policy terms, it would only accommodate 1 reasonable sized car. Obviously, the starting point is policy position and what we would class a car parking space to be, just for clarity. Thank you, Chairman.
Hayley, could you sort of wave your cursor at the exact spot this would be?
Yeah, I can't quite see it where it is.
I would help me know if I really knew what I was looking at.
Thank you, Chairman.
From the photos, I mean, I understand the report. Please don't misunderstand me. But
no, not a problem. So this is the tree that's planned to be removed. So the drop curb will be located in this sort of location.
Okay.
This is.
Hey, do you want to show the block plan?
And on the other photo?
On this photo, this is views to the east of the application site, so that was just mainly to show members that there are no other dropped curbs within the vicinity, and then this is to show the changing character of area towards the west of the site. Yes, the block plan.
So as you can see here, members, this is the grass, or show that you can explain it. The grass area that's going to be removed.
Yeah, so this is the grass verge at the moment with the public footpath here, which you can very just about see the dotted line, which denotes the verge from the pathway.
So they park in the road, do they, anyway, at the moment?
There are designated lay-bys along the glebe and on this side of the road, and also I believe there are other parking availabilities to the west.
I didn't realise there were designated lay-bys. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that helps me quite a lot. Could it be grass-created or whatever reliably? Could that be conditioned, and would it work, Mr. Lee? Anybody?
Through you, Chairman. Obviously, officers, as the report says, we can condition that it would be that. Whether or not officers have got concerns that would overcome the harm, because it would still erode the grass verge, which obviously is an attractive feature in the street scene and result in the loss of the tree. So officers' opinion are that that's just a fundamental issue that this won't overcome. But yeah, it could be imposed if members think it overcomes the harm.
Okay.
Within their gift.
Okay. Any other member? Councillor Bamford.
Chairman, I did put a request to speak on the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Right. Firstly, I think the officers put the wrong picture up at the beginning of this presentation. It's not the same as the picture that's on the agenda in the pack that we have. So that might have confused things a bit. Now, I've been reading what the parish council have said, and they seem to be quite strongly against this happening. And I can understand some of the objections. However, the applicant, I think it was, who Mr. Johnson read out what they said. They said that certain other properties in Glebe Road, is it, or Avenue, had put drop curbs in. And I wondered if those are on the side with the green area or not, because I think the other side doesn't have the green verge. So that was one question. Where were those other drop curbs? My other question is, if this was allowed, I think you asked this question already, Chairman, could we enforce having the tree reinstated and the grass reinstated either side of the driveway? And really, are there other driveways along this glebe that go across this grass verge? Or is this the only request, which seems to be at the end? So if that makes any sense, sorry, I'm not in the best of health at the moment, as you can probably hear. So, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I can answer this one.
Right, thank you. Sorry. I mean to exclude you.
No, that's fine. In relation to the query about the location of the other dropped curbs, it's at number 30, the glebe. So it's quite a few properties to the east of the application site. So it's quite a distance. And there's one that's recently been approved in that location too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, do they go across this grass verge?
So I don't know if you could catch that.
Sorry, Ms. Parkane, they're on the opposite side of the road, aren't they, though?
No, these are on the same side of the road, but the grass verge isn't as prominent in that location. It's a lot narrower.
Tell you what, could someone who's swifter than I am get Google Earth, Google thingy up on for us?
That's what I'm trying to look at.
Well done. Anybody? Mr. Lee, you're fairly swift with these things.
No comment, Chairman. I've got to Google straight up. Ms. Hayes, do you want to give us a bit of a direction on what to do with it, though? Just drop down on the bleep. That's even less helpful comment.
Yeah, I can't see your screen though.
Can you not see?
I can't.
Can anyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. That's
you've taken control.
I can see
Sorry.
a screen.
I can
So
see a
there's
black hole.
So this
Right.
is the drive. This is the driveway to the east of the site.
Yeah.
And then our these are the designated lay-bys for parking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this is our application site here. So
I see.
Sorry.
as you can
that one
see,
there.
So,
Hang on.
yeah, turn around. So that's it.
this is the applicant. So it'd be here.
It's quite a big. Yeah, it's not quite the same, is it?
No.
No.
No, it's not.
No, it's not the same.
Sorry, Councillor Moore. Can we
Is that
have a look at
tree being removed?
Yes,
Chairman?
Councillor Keys.
Sorry,
Can
can
we
I
just,
just add? Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I do recall the decision on the other site where there is the existing crossover adjacent. The infringement upon the grass verge was quite minor. That was the reason why that decision was taken. So we are looking at a completely different situation.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Sorry. Can I just confirm that's the tree we're looking at that's would go?
Yeah.
And
thank
in
you.
relation
That was
to
very
Councillor
helpful.
Bamford's point, the applicant doesn't have ownership of land either side of this, so we won't be able to require the tree to be replaced on. So,
But
so
they
the
do
answer
have
is no.
they do have ownership of the verge.
I'm
presumably.
estimating it's highway land.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask. So they're going to nick a piece. Are they going to nick a piece of highways land then? Not really sure about that.
Yeah, it is highway land. Obviously, to some extent they have the rights to do that. Obviously, we're not unitary, so we haven't got quite as much of a ability to answer certain questions, which you can in other places, and an ability to maybe be a little bit more robust in certain matters. But it may well be that highways would say no, but that's not a part of the decision-making process for us.
But highways own the top couple of spades worth or something, don't they? Because this came up in a village of mine with a walkable verge, and the landowner said, what if I don't give permission? And highways said, we control, even if you own it and it's on your deeds, we still control the top 2 spades worth. Councillor Bamford will remember where I mean. So there's nothing actually to stop highways coming along and concreting it or regrassing it or whatever they're liking it, presumably at that rate. I'm not happy. I'm not sure that we're in a position to really know what we're doing myself, and that puts me very much in favour of the recommendation. So if anyone else has something else to offer, please do. Otherwise, I'd like to go to the vote.
I think, Chairman, yeah, thank you. I don't think it's going to improve the street scene very much, and I would support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford?
No, I just want to, I was just getting ready for the vote, Chairman.
Oh, okay. Right, no one else has indicated they wish to speak. So, yeah, Katie, could we vote, please? Which, this time we're actually looking at the recommendation, which is to refuse.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. So we are voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. Members, I'll take your names in alphabetical order. Please state clearly for, against or abstain. Councillor Bamford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
Thank you. It is 7 for, none against, and no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm back to my... Right, we are on item 8, which is any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. There are none of those. So I'm going to close the meeting with even more than my usual thanks to all contributors, but particularly the officers in this case, who I know you work very hard, and this can't be an easy way to work. So thank you for your contributions this afternoon. I draw the meeting to a close at, I make that 3:40. And as the meeting is closed, members are advised not to enter into further discussions on this forum, and please to leave the meeting promptly. Thanks everyone. Bye.